What up, everybody? It's Frank Muller, back at it again with another video today. You're watching Level Up, Double Down, where we don't play around unless it's video games. Now, before we proceed with today's episode, I really want to thank each and every one of you who's taken the time out to view my content, and I hope it's been able to bring value into your life. Now, with that being said, in order for me to gain traction so my videos are more present in your news feed and to have a prayer of a chance to make it on YouTube, I really do need your support. My channel is in this grassroots stage and I'm an up-and-comer, so for my channel to grow, all I ask is for you guys who appreciate what it is that I have to offer is to take the time to like my video and to subscribe to my channel. It doesn't cost you anything. I'm not trying to turn this into a charity case. I'm just being realistic. So I hope that's not asking too much. So with that out the way, let's go ahead and get things started. So in today's episode, we need to have a talk about the current RAM pricing situation. So if you've been living under a rock all this time or you haven't gotten the memo yet, let me bring you up to speed. RAM prices are skyrocketing to the moon. Better yet, it's surpassing the moon and the Dogecoin of all things. So, the increase in RAM prices is getting out of hand, which has manufacturers scrambling, trying to figure out ways to mitigate the damage without taking too many losses. I'll get into the more minute details about that later on in this video. But what that means though, is that there will be an increase in RAM prices if it hasn't already happened, which is already inevitable for the consumer, leaving them to be the ones holding the bag. And this phenomenon is already affecting the DIY PC community space at large. In this video, I'm going to go into detail regarding the current state of affairs as well as my own personal experience as it relates to this whole debacle. To make a long story short, for those of you who prefer to ruin the movie for everybody else rather than watching to the end, this current market is fucked. Okay, I kid, and maybe that was a little bit too hyperbolic, but to give you guys some hope, I've seen this trend come and go as long as I've been building PCs since 2007, and I'm noticing how this whole controversy is causing mass hysteria in the current DIY PC market. So, the folks who are vigilant, those who wait out the storm, will be the ones who benefit the most, since there will be an eventual bottoming out of the market to the point where prices are going to have to be forced to come back down to earth to reality, since the RAM is only as valuable as what the market is willing to bear or what someone is willing to pay for it. So it'll adjust accordingly over time in order for the market to correct itself. So if you vote with your wallets and you leave these manufacturers hanging high and dry, they'll eventually cave. We've seen this happen before after COVID when there was an overstock of GPUs because AIBs, as in add-in board partners, manufactured too many graphics cards since the execs and suits thought that the average working consumer was going to stay inside at home forever, and that's when crypto mining went bust since the value of Bitcoin plummeted. I noticed because during that time, I bought 3 RDNA 2 GPUs for the cheap. So, today, I'm going to review with you a 6-year timeline from my first-hand account, which details how prices have changed over time. I'll show you how much I spent buying DDR4 dual RAM stick kits from Amazon in 2019, in 2023, and in 2025. And the underlying answer to the question you guys are all dying to know and understand: why are RAM prices skyrocketing? So sit back and relax as I give you a talking head session. Pause. Alright guys, so as you can see, I'm in my Amazon account, and from the looks of it, I placed an order on November 29, 2019, and it was for some Corsair low profile Vengeance memory, 32 gigabytes in total, 16 gig sticks each, and the frequency was 3200 megahertz with the cache latency being CL16. And this is DDR4. This is when I started getting into Ryzen. I had set up a Ryzen 5000 PC rig, and I will say that I was very pleased with what I encountered. So if you notice, for those guys who've been paying attention, the price that it cost was $119.99, but when you take into account all the discounts that I had applied, my order turned out to be $102.45. And if anybody is aware, this was Black Friday of 2019 whenever I placed this order, which goes back to something I've always tried to tell you guys. If you are planning to build a PC, I would suggest buying the parts during times when there are sales, such as Black Friday or Cyber Monday, Prime Day, or during times when Amazon holds their flash sales. And those are pretty random, so they're not gonna be definitive. All right, so we're gonna go to another order that I had placed. And this order was placed on July 11th, 2023. And as you can see, this is for Corsair Vengeance LPX or low profile DDR4, but this time it's a 16 gigabyte kit. And it's 8 gigabytes per stick, 3200 megahertz with CL16 cache latency. So I try to be consistent, and I try to make sure that when I purchase RAM, that if I'm satisfied with what is it that I purchased before, then I try to stay consistent and buy the same thing after the fact. Now, this particular RAM kit, when I purchased it, I bought it from Amazon resale and the condition was used good. However, whenever I received it, it actually was in good condition. So for anybody who is on the fence about buying return products from Amazon, I do it all the time, and I've never really had that much of a concern. Now nowadays it might be hit or miss, but for the most part, everything's turned out all right from what I've experienced. Now, just to get back on topic here, if you notice, this RAM cost me only $33.43. And when you add taxes, and this can vary depending on where you stay, if you are in the US, the total came out to be $36.31. So, but at the same time, keep in mind that the bare minimum I had to pay $33.43. All right. Now, just out of curiosity, for kicks and giggles, I would like to see how much does it cost now, since it's 2025 instead of 2023. And what do you know? And this is no cap, because if you notice, it says July 11, 2023 for the order in which I placed. So you can see that this is the same memory kit. And as you can see, it went from $34 to $87. Basically, my RAM cost over twice as much as what I originally paid for. And I know this is brand new, but I'm just trying to get you guys to understand the mindset that I'm coming from, that prices have gone through the roof. And this is just a blatant example of that. Now, I do want you guys to know that I did buy that 32 gigabyte kit again in 2025. And as you can see, this is a kit that I bought from my brother's PC that I built on my previous video. If you haven't checked out that video, it should be up top here. But anyway, as you can see, this is a whole brand new kit, and it only cost me $74.99. What I'm getting at is this. If you notice earlier, I had mentioned that the RAM that I paid for in 2019, it was $119.99. But in 2025, and this is July 8th, 2025, that same RAM only costs $75, which is crazy how the RAM came down $50, brand new, OMG. Well, technically it's $40 or $45, but I'm not keeping up with math here. But still, you guys get the point that I'm trying to make. Now, let's just see how much that same kit of RAM costs today in 2025. And mind you, July 8th, now it's gonna be November of 2025. November 20th of 2025 is when this video is being recorded. And what do you know? I'm not capping, because as you can see, it does show the date in which I placed the order of that RAM. But in this current moment, that same stick of RAM costs twice as much as what it cost me back in July. So if we do the math here, July was, let's see, August, September, October. 4 months later. 4 months later, and you're being forced to pay twice as much for the same kit of RAM. That makes no freaking sense. Now, you guys haven't seen this new rig that I'm about to build, but if you stick around in the channel and subscribe, I'm gonna show you guys a new PC build of mine that's gonna be used for both editing and gaming. And I actually purchased some RAM back in July as well for that rig, but I haven't got a chance to build that rig since I've been doing all kind of other things. But that stick of RAM only cost me $150, and this is on eBay. So I do want you guys to understand that it does say you bought this item and it's $150 worth, and this is sold out. So whoever the seller was, they had some pretty good prices, because for a 48 gigabyte kit of DDR5, mind you, not DDR4, DDR5 RAM for $150, that was a pretty good deal, because I did a lot of searching, price matching when it came to my decision to buy this RAM. And I'm not trying to give this seller any clout, but hey, if you want to buy from them, go ahead, I don't care. But as you can see, the RAM cache latency is CL30, and yeah, this is pretty good. Now, what I want to do is, I want to just, out of curiosity, see how much this same kit of RAM costs. So I'm just gonna just copy this real quick. DDR5 6000 megahertz. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to Amazon and we're gonna find a similar kit of RAM for that price. So let me go ahead and paste that back in. Hopefully this does come up with a option. All right, so here's a 48 gigabyte kit we can compare to, and it is the same kit except it is RGB. And as you can see here, it's CL30, CL30, 6000 megahertz, DDR5 RAM. And what do you see? OMG, $590.77. What in a flying fuck? Seriously, like, if you go back to my order on eBay, I only paid $150. So yeah, that's just from my personal experience, the conundrum we're up against when it comes to the influx in prices for RAM today. So I'm just gonna go through a few articles just to kind of give you an idea of how long this has been going on, because I've been seeing the tea leaves over time. So for instance, this is a particular article from August 1st, 2024. DRAM prices will increase up to 53% in 2024 and another 35% in 2025 as memory industry delivers record revenue growth. All right, so this article comes from WCCF Tech, and just to, I guess, skim through the article, the recent rise in AI demand is going to affect the price and revenue generation of DRAM and NAND flash memory products. And I do appreciate WCCF Tech for sourcing TrendForce's data, because TrendForce is the actual group that's been keeping up or keeping track of the trends when it comes to DDR4, DDR5 RAM prices, better yet, just DRAM in general. All right, we're gonna go to the next article. This one is from WCCF Tech as well. DRAM prices expected to soar as memory makers prioritize server DDR5 over PC memory. So it says major DRAM makers prioritize server DRAM and HBM production, impacting the PC DRAM prices. Both DDR4 and DDR5 DRAM are expected to see price surge. Yeah, looks like the DDR5 RAM prices will further increase in the coming months as major DRAM manufacturers have shifted their focus to supply more DRAM chips to their customers in the server market. TrendForce forecasted that 3 giant DRAM makers, Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron, are prioritizing the server DRAM and HBM production, which will squeeze the supply of PC, mobile, and consumer DRAM. The news comes out a day after Samsung has reported to bump DRAM and NAND prices by up to 30%. These DRAM companies, man, they have a lot of pull in the market, and they do control the futures of a lot of these RAM manufacturers, which is crazy to have that much power, and it's consolidated through 3 different companies. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next article, and that is this one from WCCF Tech. AI sparks a DRAM supercycle after years of stagnation driven by massive HBM adoption as big tech rushes to build custom ASICs. And there you have it. AI is a culprit, you know, and that is going to be an overgoing or ongoing theme moving forward throughout this video. AI demands are what are pushing the prices further. And now, I do want to let you guys know that these articles that I'm going over, I'm reading them in chronological order based on their date that they were published. So just keep that in mind. All right, so this one is from PC Gamer. Uh-oh, it's happening again. AData chairman says the perfect storm of simultaneous DRAM, SSD, and HDD storage shortages is already upon us, and it looks like prices are only going in one direction, and that means up. And then you see the subtitle, all in the name of AI slot. And so, as you can tell, AI is a big bane in our side and a thorn in our ass when it comes to the DIY PC community space and the market as a whole. I mean, it always behooves me how it's either one thing or another that causes pain when it comes to the prices that consumers have to pay. The average consumer has to pay in a DIY market for PC parts. And this happened with GPUs. I remember back in 2015, or actually take that back, 2017, GPU prices were just skyrocketing like crazy because of crypto mining. And I remember it was towards the end of 2016 up until the end of 2018 when GPUs were just being scalped, and it was a shortage because everybody was just gravitating towards buying GPUs just to mine crypto. And I remember I had to wait to get an upgraded GPU. I wanted a 1080 Ti, but I wasn't trying to pay, exorbitant prices for it. So I waited until Black Friday of 2018 in order to be able to buy myself a 1080 Ti. And at that time, I bought it in the used market because those miners, those crypto miners, they no longer had any need for them. And I remember I had bought mine from a guy in the UAE, Saudi Arabia. The guy had a crypto rig. We had a good conversation back and forth, and he explained to me, like, he only used it to mine crypto, but it was lightly used, and I can tell, like, the card itself, it was in working condition, and I made sure I tested it, and it shipped all the way from Saudi Arabia, and I still have that card to this day. And I love that 1080 Ti. It's a very legendary card. And not to get off topic here, but moving on, I'm just gonna read a few sentences from this article. So it says that a couple of weeks ago, I reported on the idea that AI was going to cause a run on all kinds of memory and shortage hardware. Well, it's already happening according to no less an authority than the chairman of memory specialist ADATA. And then they go over into all the segments. It says ADATA's Chin Leibai, or whatever, however you pronounce his name, has said that supplies of all of the major memory and shortage technologies, DRAM, NAND, and HDD, are now in shortage. Chin says it's the first time that it has happened in 30 years. All right, so moving to the next article. This comes by courtesy of WCCF Tech. Now might be one of the best times to buy DDR5 and DDR4 RAM modules, as prices are expected to rise further, even after a 30 to 50% jump. So let me just read a few of the sentences in this article. DDR5 And DDR4 memory prices are expected to see a sharp rise according to the recent estimates, as a DRAM supercycle fueled by AI has gobbled up nearly all the production capacity. Major DRAM suppliers are expected to bump up prices by 30%, prompting a similar consumer market reaction. Like I had mentioned, AI is going to be the ongoing theme moving forward as it pertains to why these shortages are occurring. So yeah, I mean, this was inevitable, and even based on the charts that I had presented earlier in those articles from TrendForce, they've been keeping up with this thing, and it's been a W shape all throughout this time when it comes to these PC components. So moving forward on the next article, we got here, server DRAM prices surge up to 50% as AI-induced memory shortage hits hyperscaler supply. US and China customers, or Chinese customers, only getting 70% order fulfillment. So this situation could potentially dictate whether or not a company survives. And in this economic climate, it doesn't make things any better. The guy in the previous article that we had read, I believe from PC Gamer, had mentioned how it was a perfect storm. Well, it's really the perfect storm when you take into account the current climate or economic climate we're in. All right, now I'm just gonna read a few sentences from this article. The DRAM supply chain is choking and server memory is taking the first hit. According to DigiTimes, major US and Chinese hyperscalers are now receiving just 70% of the server DRAM they order. That's despite agreeing to contract price increases of up to 50% for Q4, well above the 30% hike many buyers had budgeted for earlier this year. So it's crazy how these companies are being hamstrung and their arms are being twisted to buy, and they're basically forced, because they had signed a contract forcing them to buy it at the increased prices. That's crazy. So yeah, you got a lot of AI companies just buying the whole market, man. It's like they had no chill. So yeah, there's gonna be even more of this conundrum occurring. So I'm gonna go to the next article. Samsung and other memory manufacturers reportedly leave DDR5 buyers hanging as prices expected to surge 30 to 50% every quarter from the end of 2025 through that first half of 2026. Sheesh. So we're looking at over 6 months at least when it comes to the RAM prices and the bleeding that's going to occur for buyers. This is crazy. This article really just goes into detail about what I just mentioned earlier, essentially just regurgitating the talking points from the last article I had read from Tom's Hardware. Now I'm just gonna skip over to the next article, and this one talks about rising RAM prices could be the next big problem for PC gamers as Asus warns of massive price hikes if shortages continue. The common denominator, which is AI, who are buying up the bulk of all the DRAM that's available, it's going to inevitably lead to price increases across the board. So, I mean, what do you expect? I mean, supply and demand is the name of the game here. Costs are going to eventually go up only because of the scarcity that we have in the market when it comes to DRAM. All right, the next article. Samsung rumored memory price hike could be a catastrophe for PC gamers, potentially driving RAM prices to unimaginable levels. So this is on November 14th, 2025. And this kind of goes into the same explanation that the last article went into about the reason for the price hikes. We're just gonna go to the next one real quick. So AI eating all the DRAM. DDR5 prices just doubled. GPUs could be next. DRAM pricing could kill NVIDIA RTX 50 super plans. And that is another side effect of this phenomenon that we're going through, which is that all those rumored GPUs that were expected to be coming out soon, doesn't look like that's gonna be in the equation anytime. So a lot of this that's happening is causing a domino effect. So it's affecting the viability of these companies being able to profit. And so what's happening is it's gonna ultimately affect their bottom line when it comes to profiting. So they're gonna have to raise prices in order to keep up with the demand. And that's actually gonna probably turn away buyers, especially if you don't have it like that when it comes to money. So the next article, AMD reportedly notifies of imminent GPU price hike. All models to be affected due to rising memory costs. And what's even crazier is AMD, they never were able to get their cards at MSRP. I didn't buy my 9070 XT at $600. I had to buy my freaking card at $670. And now cards have actually leveled to the point where they're now at MSRP. That is if you want the ASRock Challenger, which is an ugly card in my opinion, but to each his own. I mean, cosmetics is not really the name of the game when it comes to PC building, since everything's gonna be stuff in the case and it may not even be seeing the light of day for a while if you have one of those panels without glass. But still, I still want a card that I admire to look at. But anyway, to each his own. Now, just to move on to the next article, we have here, memory shortages have become so severe that distributors are now forcing RAM buyers to buy a motherboard with every module. Oh, wow. So basically, as I had referenced earlier, this whole conundrum has everybody's balls in a vice grip, because now it's forcing these RAM buyers and to basically buy a motherboard with the module. So it's like everybody's looking out for their own bottom line. All right, so it appears that distributors within the supply chain have found ways to capitalize on memory shortages to drive extra margins. And this is apparently done by forcing consumers to buy motherboards with RAM purchases. That reminds me of those bundles that Micro Center and Newegg would host, where it includes RAM with a motherboard. And I'm pretty sure you're gonna start seeing an influx of those coming soon. Mark my words. A lot of this situation is gonna trickle downstream. So you're gonna see these retailers in America, they're gonna be implementing this same policy as well. All right, so the next article from WCCF Tech, and this is dated November 17, 2025. Within 3 months, Samsung DDR5 5600 16GB module price rose by 3 times in South Korea. Sheesh! So, the DRAM price hike mess is making it extremely difficult to find decently priced DDR5 RAM modules or kits worldwide. South Korea DIY market witnesses insane memory price hike. 16GB 5600 DDR5 went from $47 to $142 per module. So the last article I'm gonna go over, last but not least, AMD and NVIDIA could kill off budget GPUs as memory shortages drive costs up, leaving entry-level gamers with little options. Yep, RIP, man, to any of you guys who don't buy the mid-tier or higher tier model of GPUs. Now, just to read here, this isn't good news for the PC gamers at all, as a new report suggests that GPU manufacturers may halt production of mid to high-end gaming GPUs to address memory shortages. AMD and NVIDIA could halt budget GPU production as memory shortages force them to reallocate capacity. It appears that DRAM shortages are going to affect gamers on a much larger scale than just being confined to RAM supply, as according to a report by the Korean media outlet Hank Young, I'll just say Hank Young. It is rumored that AMD and NVIDIA are looking to discontinue budget-oriented GPUs since their BOM, bill of materials, has risen dramatically with higher GDDR module prices. The report doesn't specifically mention which SKUs could be affected by this move, but our best guess is that NVIDIA 60 class and 50 class models would most likely be the victims here. If you notice, AMD is putting a lot of effort into their APUs, way more effort than they have been since the beginning of Ryzen. And what I'm beginning to see is that your entry-level starter GPUs that were the more affordable option are no longer being produced as much as they were before. I remember when those Polaris cards were a thing. Those were your entry-level cards. Those Polaris cards, like the RX 580, RX 480. Those, the writing has been on the wall. Those APUs that AMD has been putting all their R&D into, those are going to be the new entry-level GPUs. Basically, you're going to have to buy a CPU that integrates the GPU in it in order for you to get those entry-level GPUs if you are one of those buyers on a budget, or if you're new to gaming and you basically are trying to get a GPU that does the bare minimum. You're not going to be able to buy something that's discrete. And mark my words, this is going to be a thing where there's going to be a situation where AMDs are only going to start with like 9070 cards. 9060 cards, they're not going to be a thing because of the fact that they're going to basically put so much effort into the quality and development of those APUs that it's going to defeat the purpose or negate the need to use or to even buy an entry-level GPU. This is it, man. This is the climate we're living in. All right, so to any of you guys who would like to take the opportunity to read up on some of the articles that I presented on your own time, don't worry, I've included links to these articles in the video description below. Now, as I had already mentioned, the three main companies who control the DRAM market include SK Hynix, Micron, and Samsung. And depending on their ambitions, for all we know, this whole situation could be staged by them by reducing the amount of allocation they're offering to manufacturers in order for them to cause a shortage in RAM. Similar to how Nintendo would manufacture scarcity in order for their offerings to appear as though they're more valuable than they really are, which would then lead to higher profit margins for those DRAM companies I just mentioned. I'm not trying to start a conspiracy here. I'm just putting out a different perspective on the matter. However, for any of you OpenAI, ChatGPT, Grok AI, NVIDIA, Claude, or Anthropic fanboys, etc., I have a controversial opinion that I'm going to reveal to you guys that might make some of you blow a gasket or crash out. But hey, I gotta keep it real and tell it like it is. Man, I gotta keep it 100. And that is, I cannot fucking wait till this whole AI bubble bursts. And if you're mad about that, I got a Home Depot bucket ready, waiting on you so you can shed all those crocodile tears like I'm supposed to give a flying fuck. The way the AI market has been artificially propping up the economy is going to eventually lead to a bloodbath, aka a recession, and it's going to affect a large demographic of people, whether it be the stock market or pensions held by civil servants of society, 401k account holders. Mark my words, and at the end of the day, there will be only winners and losers. I hate to sound like doom and gloom right now, but if you'd rather me tell you what you want to hear, then I suggest you stop listening to my opinion right now. I'm just saying. And no, the government better not step in to rescue those floundering AI companies like Captain Save-A-Ho, just like they did in 2008 when Bush used taxpayer dollars to pull out these banks from financial ruin over the poor decisions those companies made on their own dime, proclaiming they were too big to fail. Too big to fail my ass? I have a long memory, and I remember the devastation that had occurred during 2008. At that time, people became broke overnight by either taking an L on their investment portfolio or losing their job, and some even lost their retirement or their homes. I just so happened to graduate college that year and was unable to find a line of work in my major. And even though I couldn't afford to live on my own at that time, I was fortunate enough to have my parents who gave me a place to rest my head at until I was able to get on my own feet. So shout out to my parents. A lot of folks out there may not be so lucky in the current economic climate we're in, and all this chaos going on right now is interconnected since we're like 6 degrees separated from one another, and when profit centers that stimulate the economy by making the world turn are negatively impacted, then that will definitely cause an imminent domino effect. So as I wrap up this video, feel free to let me know in the comments, what were your thoughts about the presentation I gave? If you're interested in this type of content related to global events that affect the DIY PC market, hit the subscribe button below and turn on all your notifications so you don't miss a thing. And also, if you made it this far into the video, I want to sincerely thank you for watching. So until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and share. Again, this is Frank Mula signing out. Holla at me.